Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese with another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. It is Wednesday, the day. Oh, it's Thursday. It's the first day of the NFL. So I don't know if we're going to get into fantasy football, but we have Michael Brown from Bowery Capital. If you don't know who Bowery is, they're definitely one of the elite VCs, particularly at least as I see them out of the Northeast Boston area, but I know they do stuff all over the country. So, Michael, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think one of our, I always like to ask this question is, how do you become a VC, right? It's like, what was your story?
The answer to how you become a VC is there are many, many paths, which is unfortunate. I'd like there to be a playbook, but there really isn't. You have people that started companies that wanted to go onto the investing side. You have people who were professional investors throughout their career. Some of us never did anything except VC. For their career. And then my specific story. So I was an equity research analyst. I started my career at Morgan Stanley on the sell side. And I specifically covered a grouping of companies called PC and Systems Hardware. So PC is fairly obvious. It's, names like Apple and IBM and Lenovo and others, but Systems Hardware at the time was a bit of software and a bit of hardware. So it was this weird time in software as a service where Salesforce had been public for 4 or 5 years. Nobody really knew what was going, on and where this ecosystem was going to go. So the names were basically like Salesforce, EMC, Network Appliance, Symantec, a lot of the what I'd call sort of V1.0 or OGs of the software ecosystem. And so I did that for a bit. I really enjoyed it. I got a unique opportunity to move on to the family office side, which was working for Richard Branson's family office. So most people know him. For those that don't, I mean, the Virgin group of companies has made him a billionaire many times over, and they need to hit, the powers that be need to manage his money effectively. So I was on an investment team that specifically was doing venture capital investing. So that was where I kind of got into the industry. The application of my skill set as a research analyst was particularly helpful to the team. I could analyze companies, look at infrastructure and application, saw mostly software businesses, and tell them where I thought the world was going to go.
So did you get to pitch? Did you get to pitch Branson? Like these are the
Well,
ideas?
he at the time was a member of the investment committee. There were 7 people that really ran the group, if you will. And so, we'd prepare these elaborate memos, and it was a lot of intense debate and discussion around investments. And so.
Michael, how much of being a VC is understanding the present market and environment versus predicting the future and where it's headed?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things I'd say. One is, like, at our firm, we don't have a crystal ball, nor do we think we're smarter than any entrepreneur that walks through our door. The logic being, hey, our job is to sit at a 30,000 foot view, and a founder of a technology company is going to have the passion, the expertise, the necessity to do so much more, information gathering. And really, we like to say, like, we try and find students of particular industries, people who can actually almost become teachers and educate us on why this is a huge problem or a huge issue. So the first thing I'd say is, look, you've always got to be forward leaning, but mostly that comes from an entrepreneur's mentality and perspective. And it's 100% of the time that we're saying, hey, we had a high level insight about this ecosystem, but this founder really cemented it in our minds, and we feel that they have what it takes to build a very large software company in said category. Then the second thing I'd say is, there are some areas where we do have expertise and significant overlap with our backgrounds. And so in those areas, we take a bit more nuanced approach, meaning we're almost really narrow about where we think the world is going to go. And most of our internal debates are highly technical and specific around those particular areas. So it's almost harder to convince us in spaces that we know really well than it is in areas that we don't. And for those, yeah, we have a learned mind, but really a perspective and a point of view on where the world is going to go. If you bottle all this up, the real answer to your question, we're almost always forward leaning and forward thinking, either through the experience of an entrepreneur or through our own personal backgrounds.
So with that in mind, do you feel like there's increasing appetite for like vertical specific SaaS plays?
Yeah. I mean, probably about, we have this odd history at our firm where we get in business in 2013. We make a number of investments around core areas that we knew quite well: marketing, technology, the ERP stack, couple infrastructure investments. And then we make this completely random investment in 2014 in a trucking marketplace business called Transfix. And it deviated pretty significantly from our model. Of course, it's a software as a service company, and its delivery model, it mimics a marketplace, right? So you have a supply and demand equation that you need to get right. There is a quote unquote tax that they take for being a part of the marketplace. But we were really passionate about supply chain and logistics. We knew the ecosystem at a high level. The two founders came in and really wowed us, and we took a chance, sort of deviating from our themes and ideas. And now, if you fast forward, about a third of our portfolio is what I'd call industry cloud or vertical oriented, meaning if you think about an ideal customer profile or a buyer persona, it's extremely specific to an industry code or a specific, industry is the right word here. And so we have companies that only sell into manufacturing businesses, or only sell into truckers, or only sell, we get even more narrow. We have a company that only sells into the US chemicals industry. And I think that's kind of the quick story on us. In a more macro sense, what is happening is there's really two main themes that are driving this. One is the digital native coming into the workplace now in an oil and gas business or a manufacturing business or whatever, and taking the reins of software purchasing. And 10 years ago, that was usually tied up in a CIO bucket or at an executive function, really hard to pull away. Think about your sort of old CIOs and their ex-lawyers or accountants, right? We have this whole new paradigm of the digital native coming into the workplace generally, but it's really starting to affect a lot of these industry cloud segments. And so
how does that really affect the industry, right? Is the digital
just the
native
software that they buy is massively different. The pricing schema on the delivery and implementation, they want to be totally different, right? Much faster, a lot easier to get it an install base up and running, but then also to remove it if necessary. So you have pricing dynamics, you have user experience dynamics, which are coming into play, right? A old line manufacturing business that operates physical plants is probably an SAP shop plus a bunch of database businesses. Fast forward to today, and a 45-year-old that is on Twitter all day using an iPhone, probably has a tough book, is making a purchasing decision. They don't, the way they think about software purchasing is just vastly different. So that's one thing. The second dynamic, which is happening, is pretty much every CEO of any industry cloud segment is going through a digital transformation journey. They're hiring McKinsey, Deloitte, BCG, whoever. They're getting this $5 million presentation that says you need to do X, Y, and Z ASAP. The board probably has a committee on innovation, and we got to get digital. They read all these news, things about how we got to be smarter about digital. Coronavirus, by the way, has only accelerated this. And so you have this kind of groundswell from the bottom up, but you also have executive buy-in and almost board buy-in at the need to change and digitize. Most of this, if you think of classic ROI statements, is really on the cost saving side, like substituting human capital problems, workflow problems, process problems, whatever, for technology.
If you run into anybody that's paying those people $5 million, please introduce them to Scott. We'll do it for free.
Listen, I talked to the,
right, Scott? We can do it for $3. Right?
Yeah, I talked to the industry cloud. So, and of course, all of these firms that I mentioned, mostly consulting shops that I mentioned, have industry cloud leader, right? And there's like a industry 4.0 person,
right?
You know, for manufacturing and healthcare and this and that. And yeah, I mean, it's a wild time in many of those services businesses because their revenue is off the charts in these segments to a degree that I don't think they ever thought really. So
I wanted to ask, because you did bring it up and I was planning to ask anyway, where do you know, in this industry, you know, COVID is affecting the ability to grow. Where is it not? Where is it hurting? You know, how do you guys even just view it as, you know, this is terrible, it's horrible, we don't want anybody to get sick, you know, we get that. But on the business side, you know, it's harder to do X or it's easier to do Y.
And for just in general, or any specific.
And I think in general, but I think if you know, we'll probably dive into a specific, or if there's a specific you want to mention, feel free.
I mean, look, I think everything that you're seeing from the cloud computing group of publicly traded companies is cascading down and consistent with what we're seeing at the seed stage, which broadly is to say a huge acceleration in digital transformation, e-commerce, all this stuff. And so for infrastructure and application software businesses that aren't maybe exposed to specific industry segments, and I'll come back to that, it's gangbusters. I mean, I think maybe more narrowly, March, April, May, pipelines were off 50% if our companies were mature and consistent with a sales process map, 80 to 90% if it was an emerging company that didn't really qualify well and didn't have much pipeline coverage. You know, and it's like you needed a Zoloft in Q2, Q1, and then into Q2 as a result. And you have to have very difficult board conversations just around where the world is going to go, and you have to slash and burn. You have to get to profitability, all of these things. I don't think anybody anticipated how fast stuff would come back. And so while we were tracking leading indicators, we were changing compensation schemas, we were just kind of trying to like figure the world out. I think it came roaring back to a degree where now 90% of our portfolio is at or above where their revenue number was going to be for this year. In some of these businesses that were exposed, for instance, the media and gaming, education technology, transportation, logistics, just think of categories where people are now sitting at home and remote work and work from home is cemented. Usage on these platforms has skyrocketed. So some of our portfolio companies, they're actually going to be 110 to 125% of plan for the year because there is just a massive acceleration in some of these worlds.
And these are the wins. And I feel like, and I could be wrong, Michael, but like, I feel like a lot of the wins from VCs get celebrated and talked about.
Yeah.
This particular VC, whose name I won't mention, is going to make like $10 billion on a particular company's like IPO soon. I was just reading about
Snowflake DB. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't going to mention it, but you
okay. Did. Yeah.
So it's on you. Here's what
I thought you were going to talk about Palantir. That's the one. You know,
here's what I want to know though. Like, how brutal is it when you whiff? When you get one wrong, or you pass on somebody, or when somebody passes on you? Like, I if you're comfortable with it, like, I want to know about the underbelly. Like, it's not all wins all the
Yeah.
time. Like you're losing more
No,
often
no.
than you're losing way more often than you're winning, but I don't hear as many of those stories. So if you could shed some light on some of that, the painful bits about being in your role, that would be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to what you were saying. One is where we conclude that this business, in our view, you know, our sort of laughable response is this isn't a fit for Bowery at this time, which is a bullshit excuse for, and forgive my language, but for we're passing and you know, we don't think this is going to be a big thing. And so the one side of your question is, yeah, I mean, there's countless ones where, oh, it, you know, yeah, it was a big thing and they're huge companies now. We don't do, there's so much velocity in the venture business on a day to day that it's hard to really sit back and reflect on those.
Is that good or
Because
bad? That's good in some way because you don't have to sit with the pain as much, maybe.
yeah, but
Really,
you know, your day to day is just reviewing new investment opportunities, scheduling calls with founders you want to invest in, finding new, you know, it's so fast that it's hard to step back and really think about the ones you missed, really.
Do you ever have that moment where you can reflect and you're like, oh my God, we just passed on Harry Potter as a movie studio, right? Like you're like, what? Wait a minute, how did we miss that?
Because as we know that, you know, you're really long in the seat in venture and it takes 7 to 10 years to know whether you're any good at this.
Which feels more painful, you passing on something that turns out to be huge or them passing on you?
Well, so in competitive deal situations where they passed on us and we wanted to do the deal, yeah, that hurts way more than we just passed and we got it wrong.
Okay.
But the thing is, so as a firm, we obviously want to get better and we're ruthlessly competitive. So when we lose something, we want to unpack it and figure out how not to do it again and what went wrong and all this stuff. So we actually, on an annual basis, do look at deals in our CRM from usually about 2 to 3 years prior. And we basically mash that opportunity object with Crunchbase data. And we essentially say, any company that's raised, let's say, more than $10 million that hits our opportunity object, what are those? Just tell us those names. And then we can actually see, wow, okay, we really missed this one or we missed that one. And most of the time what it comes down to is one of two things in our view. One is founder. So this person just didn't have a non-obvious, perspective, unique perspective, something that in our view felt differentiated. The second is we really got wrong their ability to build a go-to-market machine. And that second one, we really kick ourselves around because we pride our firm on being experts at that stuff and trying our hardest to help seed stage founders scale those things. So when the brain trust gets together and says, no inside sales motion with a, $180 ACV, no way. Cost is going to be upside down. This is disaster. It's never going to work. And then it becomes like, something huge. We're like,
they would have never invested in your
right.
in your companies, right? You think of all the things they would have missed.
And listen, Michael knows very well that they may wanted to consider investing in Qualia. They could have been a good idea at one point.
Yeah.
Okay. We don't need to rub it in.
So Michael, is there also something like, because we have a lot of early stage founders and folks, hey, if you're going to go and you're presenting, this is something you need to make sure you know really tight, right? Like in terms of this go to marketplace to get across to the VC, right? Because sometimes I could also see, yeah, they didn't get it, but maybe they didn't get it because they didn't know to get it, right?
Yeah.
So what advice would you give those people? Like, just what advice would you give someone who's like, okay, here are 3 things you need to make sure you get across really well?
Well, I think so. The biggest thing for our firm, and again, it's so specific and firm dependent, is, and I'm repeating myself, are they really students of an industry? Hey, who are the 5 to 10 prior founders that sold the company in the space? Who were the 5 to 10 market experts that you spoke with? Who are the 5 to 10 IT buyers? Did you just cold email some IT buyers and say, hey, I want to do a 30-minute chat just on this space? And like, if they haven't done that for us, our view is they don't, like, do they really want to be an entrepreneur? Have they gone deep enough to truly understand this problem? There's, of course, a perspective where if someone's already started a business in said space, we don't really, ask those types of questions. But for first-time founder, this is hard as hell, and you really got to know your stuff. So maybe that's like 1 and 2, but then 3, to your point, look, our perspective, again, and this is a founding theme of Bowery Capital, is the predominant early stage founder that we had spent time with was a product or engineering leader and maybe a business person, in air quotes. It's only recent that someone, is a disciple of Roberge or Ross and came out of 2 SaaS companies and has built a repeatable revenue motion and now is going to go start a company. When we started the firm,
say is people like me and you, Richard, have not fit the mold historically.
No, but so that was hard. When we started our firm, there just weren't that many people that knew the modern tactics and motions of software sales. I'm obviously going to get eviscerated for that statement, but so our perspective was, hey, founders generally undervalue and don't appreciate truly how hard it is to even go from, let's say, 0 to 1 in revenue. And really what that comes down to is they think sales and marketing and customer success is this kind of art. They don't really understand that it's very scientific, that there's a well-worn road and set of research. They don't put in the time and effort. And what do you get? You get horrible pipeline coverage in the beginning, no qualification frameworks that make any sense, googly-eyed founders going in and trying to convince a Fortune 500 company to do things. They focus on indirect selling, which is, who cares, right? As a channel programs are nearly impossible to scale in the beginning. They do all these, frankly, dumb things that kill the company, because again, the attractiveness of a seed stage business is mostly in sales velocity and month over month revenue growth. And if you're Bessemer or Emergence or whatever, where you've done a lot of SaaS deals, you now have pattern recognition and you can say, oh, 30% month over month, this type of, CAC LTV, blah, blah, blah. I want to fund this business. And so you waste 6, 12, 18 months if you don't appreciate how hard this is.
Why does that keep happening, Michael? Why does the collective you, in the VC world, why does the collective keep funding these people?
No, well, so my point was going to be, look, it would be very hard for us to invest in only second and third time founders. So naturally there's going to be people who come into our office and they don't know really how to build a sales playbook or a marketing playbook and scale they don't know any of this stuff. It's fine, but have they at least done the research around competitive positioning? Because that's going to come up day one. Have they really done the research around who might be the most appropriate 5 to 10 proof of concept customers if we're in kind of an inside or an outside sales motion? If, we have this new paradigm of really a marketing exercise where we're driving inbound to a website, we're converting through either a free or a paid mechanism to get people to trial or use our product or service. That's marketing. It's not, in my view, it's not really sales. Of course, we can do a lot of things with those leads that may become sales. That's a fairly new thing, less than 10 years. No one's going to come in and be a growth hacker and be amazing at that, but at least have they thought through what are those channels that they're going to activate? Does it relate to a developer or a community type of effort, right? They just have to come in and be, I'm elongating this answer, but they have to at least have some knowledge there. Otherwise, again, it's tough for us to really get excited because we know we're going to put in $1 million to $2 million in this thing. They're not going to appreciate it. They're not going to take it seriously. They're not going to be scientific about it. And we're going to have to bridge the company 12 months from now because they didn't use any rigor or seriousness of purpose around.
So and I've worked with a couple of VCs, and I've worked at a couple of companies where the VC would come in and say, okay, we've built this arm to teach you how to build the sales motion, right?
Yeah.
And then it sort of becomes this fee back into the VC, right? They got to pay you back, whatever the fee is. Do y'all have
Right.
something like that? Is that hey,
Yeah.
yeah, Richard, we see that, but our founders don't want to go there,
Are you
No.
pitching right now, Richard? I feel like Richard might be pitching.
Well, so different strokes for different folks, right? The firms you're mentioning, and I know exactly the one you're mentioning, is to step back to 30,000 feet. Scott was at Insight, created Insight's inside program, then launched OpenView, and is mostly using his experience from Insight to start OpenViewlabs, which is what you're referring to. And they are at a stage of
I should
investment.
mention it or not. So yes.
What's that?
Yes, we are. I am a fan of Scott and OpenView,
Yeah.
but I wasn't sure if you wanted me to mention it. So
Yeah, it's fine. They are operating at a Series B or a Series C stage, which generally is 10 million in ARR and above. We'll just use the kind of SaaS terms here, where our focus is really on, as an entrepreneur, scale and consistency. I already have product market fit. I already have some repeatability. I'm really just sort of tweaking the dials at this point, and using a venture playbook, which is to say a lot of cash to scale my organization super quickly. We're a seed stage investor. Usually the people we meet with just have a business plan. There's literally no product or anything. And so it would be impossible for us to charge money for this stuff or to do that kind of motion. So look, our operating principles are basically twofold. And again, go back to kind of classic ROI statement. Founder takes our money, obviously, because the partnership is great, obviously, because we focus on B2B and that's kind of all we do. But really, a seed stage founder kind of needs two things: save time or save money. Really does, and if we have the expertise internally through a team to basically go on site and do one of those two things, it's a home run and they're going to want to work with us. Of course, there's a lot to unpack there. Of course, there's a lot of nuance, but that's a general theme of an entrepreneur. Gosh, I don't have enough time. Can you help me with this sales playbook creation or case study, or help me with pricing, or help me with it, right? Or save money. Gosh, I have to pay XYZ firm to hire my first AE. Can you just do this for me for free? Yeah, great. Okay, we can do it. So anyways, that's really the two: save time, save money. If we do nothing else, we think that we'll still succeed in the eyes of an entrepreneur.
So this translates into something else that we see and we hear about a lot, right? It's the average tenure of the VP of sales, right? 18 months, dropping to 16 months, from what I've heard. And I've often seen it where it is this sort of early stage tech founder who thinks they get it after 6 months of working with the head of sales, with a revenue leader. And they try to transition them out, or the board sometimes will be like, wait, what, we need someone different or something. Do you see that being part of the challenge, or do you think that it's really like this was just not the right sales leader? Like, how do you get those? I guess here's the question: how do you get those tech-minded early stage founders, to your point, or even if they've got a good business plan, to let someone else hold the baby, right? And do that?
Yeah, I think early on, we're almost always in this founder-led selling mode. We don't think that someone will be as effective as the founder at closing the early book of business. If it's a low price software product, perhaps their complement is a marketing manager or someone who really is just ideating and being creative with them on channel proliferation, and then maintaining the presence online, but sticking maybe to sales. Yeah, I mean, whether it's inside or outside, I just think that the founder has to start, first 10, 50, 100 deals, obviously depending upon ACV. And really what we're trying to do is not only get the sales process map a bit more systematic, but we're also trying to tell the founder and work with the founder on, you're generating so much exhaust here on things that work and don't work. We got to productize this into a sales playbook as fast as humanly possible, because the person that comes after you, they're not going to know anything, right? So you'll see our firm do a lot of recording of the early calls. We'll role play internally with the founder before they go out and sell. We'll build that sales playbook alongside them, so that basically when they're going to hire that first AE or that first VP of sales, it's a well-worn path. It's 6 to 12 months of revenue generation.
That was my one question, was how long does that take? And here's a really good one, and it's a little bit of chicken egg. You got your 1 or 2 million seeds, you got, the good logos. Do you hire an AE first, or do you go after a manager VP? And I guess it's going to be it depends answer, but how do you guys coach a lot of your teams?
I'd say the broad generalization in our portfolio is we really try and find a true account executive that can complement the founder and really carry a bag primarily. The rare instance where we do come across someone who's a player first early coach, let's call it, in their career. So you have this kind of player coach model, but has consistently carried a quota and not really deviated from that. We're okay with that. The conversation usually is resourcing and how they're thinking about scale, because we don't want to put someone in that seat and then have them basically mimic an AE for another 2 years. And they're like, well, wait a minute, I thought I was going to manage people. So I'd say it's probably 75% hire the AE, 25% hire someone who's probably got a little bit of management experience and have them sort of be the initial AE and then potentially scale the organization. But there's two interesting things that I think about, and I'd be curious to get your guys' thoughts on. What's becoming more apparent is a more mature account executive that very clearly has been coached well can easily scale to your first VP of sales and alleviate this problem of going out, running that search. And I'm talking an organization that's between 1 and probably 5 in ARR. So we're not super mature. The person's maybe hit numbers for 6 to 8 quarters. They came out of a place where they were trained really well. They understand the management, piece. All right, let's give them a shot and let's put them into that first VP of sales role. And I've had varying degrees of success with it. And I don't really know what works and what doesn't. And then the second thing is, what you articulated, is why I feel like every 2 years I'm having a board conversation, which goes something to the effect of, and I'm being crude and brutal here, but it's basically like, we need to fire this VP of sales and bring on some hitter. And then 2 years later, we have to say, oh, wait, we're at 50 in ARR. All right, now we need somebody who's going to get us to 100. And I'm like, well, wait, they didn't miss a quarter. They're good. We got everything humming on training, productivity, all this stuff that they set up. What are we doing?
Before Scott answers, hold on, Scott, before you answer, you can look at the look on his face and he's like, why couldn't I have talked to this guy so many years ago? This is the, and Scott's had a tremendous run. Like he's really done well. And I say that as a friend and a guy who's worked for him. So I know his playbook. But I'm going to let Scott jump in because this is his arena, but I just felt like I need to say that, Scott. So as much shit as I give you about other stuff.
It's too early in the day and I haven't had enough tequila yet to fully answer my questions. question the way I want to. I will say this to the first point about a really kind of senior, really good AE kind of being able to do, let's call it like the first year in terms of ARR growth. The problem, I think, Michael, is you said, they need to be coached really well. And I think the problem is, where the fuck do you find that particular coach to coach this AE? Where are the guardrails there? And in a lot of orgs, they just don't exist. You might put them in place at Bowery, or other VCs might have a resource there for somebody. But if it's like a engineering founder or a finance founder who's never sold shit themselves, they can't be that guardrail, right?
Yeah,
so
that's a great point.
I think the gap is like, well, why don't you hire, some woman who's built and scaled things before and put them in as a advisor to this company, or some guy who's done it, a few times before, and kind of help, guide this person and kind of coach them. Like, yes, you're selling, but also, hey, you should be thinking about these things the way an executive would be thinking. And I think the part that screws that all up, Michael, is that companies are not putting the right coach there to guide that AE. And so they're putting that AE who's really strong, but then expecting them to just like intuitively figure all this shit out. And it's not that easy, And so it falls to pieces a little bit too often, I think,
I would also argue too that they hire pedigree. Sometimes you hire a pedigree, right? And and I'll say this many times, is that you can go find a great enterprise AE, right? I see it all the time with people from Salesforce, right? And Salesforce, they're super smart. They understand, they can follow a process. But they haven't had to get their hands dirty and actually build something from 0 to 5, right? I was always the 0 to 10 or 15, and Scott's always been up to the 25 or 30 million kind of space. And for whatever reason, I got stuck there, or I didn't want to go bigger, and people probably picked up on that, right? But nobody was ever there to coach me either. And I think generationally it's different too. I'm a Gen Xer, and I didn't really think anything about getting a mentor. Like, a mentor felt like someone who would micromanage me, right? Now you got all these millennials and Gen Z, and they're like, I got 20 mentors, right? they spend too much time on the phone with mentors sometimes. So
yeah,
it's unique. And I agree with you. Why do you think people won't give that person the shot, right? If someone scales it from 0 to 25 or 25 to 50, and they're like, oh, we need someone to get us to 100 million, right? Or we need it to go from 100 to public. Like,
and now you're just trying to get my blood boiling again, Richard. You're picking the wound here. I don't know. I could go off about this, but I don't want to steal Michael's.
I want Michael's answer, because he's the VC.
Yeah.
I would say it's almost always a combination of things, but really I'd say one is the sort of board CEO dynamic, and the consistent theme I see is a lot of later stage venture investors have built very scalable businesses, either as investors on the board or have started companies, and their influence is very significant to a CEO, where that tends to come up and usually win the day. And it's easier for a CEO to say, let's go. Yeah. Okay. Totally understand. We want to continue to build a maturing organization, and I'm fine activating this search. The second thing is, it's, as a CEO, it's glamorous. They're going to get interviews from, they're going to interview a bunch of totally amazing chief commercial officers, chief revenue officers, people who are attracted to gaining some pre-public equity and being able to manage a probably smaller organization than where they're at now, but ultimately shape it and create it in a way. So there's just this constant up leveling of your management team. And then when you get into the flow of a recruiting process, the excitement of, wow, if we hired this person, this would be amazing. as number two. Those are probably the two. I mean, the thing that I always talk to founders about is just the loyalty equation. And I just think, look, I mean, why ruin something that's working if this has been consistent, effective, productive, and we're moving the ball forward at the rate that the board of directors and the executive team thinks. I don't see it as a necessity. And most of my peers come into these conversations and it's almost guaranteed that this is going to come up every few years.
Yeah. What happens when you're, if you're going in a little earlier, right? Series A, maybe a Series B, and then the C and D folks come along. Are you cashed out? Are you pushed into a smaller piece? You just sort of sit there and now you're just going to wait because maybe the Series C and D people get board seats or something like that? Like, just what's that process? I don't know. I don't have any visibility.
Yeah.
What's
Well,
that's
the dynamic shifts.
when the next round comes.
Yeah. So we're almost always leading seed rounds of funding, and we're serving on the board of directors because we're usually leading and pricing the round. And so our relationship with the founder is, super early in their life of the company. Arguably it's at inception, and we're capitalizing a business plan to put them in business. And so there's a lot of loyalty and a lot of trust. And if we do our job as board directors, we, give appropriate advice. The team that I'm mentioning that goes in and helps these companies does well, we earn their trust, and we keep that trust. So I've changed my tune a bit on this. What I used to say was, after about the Series B or the Series C in a company, we would remove ourselves from the board of directors, predominantly to free up independent board seats so that they could put people like you and Scott on the board who have operational experience and know way more than me about this stuff. But we're now in a fundraising environment where there is so much capital in the market that I've been in probably about 3 to 5 situations where I scratch my head and say, that is a absolutely terrible piece of advice. And why this person is in a board meeting is beyond me. I don't think I'm going to leave. I think it would be beneficial for me to stick around here. So now I say, I'll do it on a case-by-case basis. And by the way, my colleague, I'm speaking for myself, but my colleague Lauren is kind of the same perspective. We should be cautious and defensive because we still have capital at risk. We still have equity ownership, and we still have a close relationship with the founder where we can call them up after the meeting and say, hey, what'd you think of that? And if they don't say, that was effing stupid, we can say, hey, here's some of the that doesn't make any sense, and here's why. So the other challenge that we're facing in this market environment is the expansion of these boards. And so I'm on a few boards, and this is a different thing, but when you have a large board, that just becomes a bear for a founder. It's a time suck. It's a huge amount of work. And so if there's ways that we can get new directors ramped quicker, if there's ways that we can chair comp committees or chair other committees and kind of be leaders, it's helpful, right? So we don't want to just leave the board with 4 or 5 years of board experience in said company. So anyways, that's the operating ethos at Bowery and how we tend to work. And look, what I'm really saying, or the kind of output of all of this, which also speaks to your question, is, yeah, I mean, look, if we're not on the board anymore, it's really hard to have any influence or any influence any change, have opinion or decision in some of the executive hiring, strategic decisions of the business. All that stuff becomes really, really, really challenging. So
this has been great, Michael. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. I'm very grateful for your candor and the way that you
sure.
answer
I'm happy to.
Some of these questions. We always end the show by saying, what can we do for you? Is there any way that we can be helpful?
Oh,
for you?
well, yeah. I mean, Sure. Yeah. The primary motivation for us always is if you or your listeners are, business software founder, super early, like literally nothing is too early for us. We would love to be considered. And we get really excited about these topics and talking through this stuff. And then the second thing is we index really heavy as a firm towards the sales, marketing, and CS stuff, but it is very specific to, seed stage, right? We're super, super early in the life of these companies, and we can't really be that effective, as I mentioned, when someone like an OpenView takes over. They just have so many more resources and stuff. But there's this gap probably around sort of 2 in ARR up to 10 to 15, where, yeah, if you have listeners that have specific expertise, we're constantly looking for adding marketing muscle to our team. There's sort of a new paradigm there with bottoms up selling that we've just been students of and have hired a lot of external consultants to our companies to work with. People who really know pricing very well is something that we've been focused on. Historically, we've kind of gone back and forth. Do we have that expertise internal or external? We've kind of now moved towards we want it externally. We don't want to have like a full-time pricing person. The list goes on and on, but you get the idea. If you're a practitioner that's got a specific area of expertise, hit me up, and would love to chat and try and at least just resource some of our companies to you. So
that's great. Happy to try to help and support you and Bowery, Michael. Appreciate you once again, Richard.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Take it away, Richard.
Yeah, this is the part where we got to plug our 2 sponsors of Lead 411 and Gong. So we're super excited they can help support us to bring these episodes to you, but also support someone like Michael Brown, coming on board and just really laying it out there for people. It's been really insightful, and I wish there were more of it, because I know there's a lot of founders and salespeople who are just like, how does this whole system work? Right. And I think you really helped shed some light on that. So thank you to our 2 sponsors of Gong and Lead 411. And Michael, thank you so much for being a part of it all.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
You too.